Sorry, let me just. Okay, well then, welcome everyone. And thank you for coming to our second session of the Student Experience Conference. We're very excited to see all you here again. And today our speaker will be Dr. Joao Ponciano. He started his career as a researcher for the International Organization for Nuclear Research in Geneva. And since then, Joao has held several positions in teaching and management in higher education at institutions across the UK, Middle East, Africa, and Asia. At Leeds Beckett University, Joao specialized in teaching mobile and fixed networking technologies and introduced compendium-based teaching practices and led the design and implementation of the first mobile and distributed computer networks postgraduate course in the UK. Joao authored and managed a European Social Fund project in women in engineering, contributing to widening participation and inclusion of women engineers, developed and ran world-class innovative academic practice methods in career development and employability. And since 2014, Joao developed and led transnational education partnerships in several countries in Southeast Asia and led a group of institutions under the group Star Education based in Singapore as Executive Dean and Senior Vice President. In the UAE, Joao led the review of all of the University of Wollongong's Dubai educational policies and procedures for accreditation under the Commission for Academic Accreditation of the Ministry of Education. Joao has held public office as chairman of the Institution of Engineering and Technology in Greater Manchester, UK, and has been an international accreditor and panel chair under the Accreditation of Higher Education Programs, Engineering Council UK. Joao has also held the role as an associate of the Higher Education Academy, promoting and ensuring the professional standards and guidelines for higher education providers and leaders across the UK higher education institutions. Joao has published in the areas of educational practice, in particular, employability and career development. He is an editorial board member of 2 international journals in the area of wireless and computer networks and consumer electronics. He is now the Vice Dean, Glasgow College, UESTC, and responsible for the management and operation of a long-standing partnership between the University of Glasgow and the University of Electronics, Science, and Technology of China. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Dr. Joao Ponciano.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for coming to this series of talks. Today's talk will be on using digital badges in monitoring and engaging students in student engagement. So just to give you all an outline of what we're going to go through today, in particular to say that this talk is very much based on academic practice. So what we will discuss here today is based on a study that's been ongoing now for the 2nd year, and we'll share some of those results with you in the course of this presentation. The context, we'll start with the context that the principles of using digital badges have been used in a course between Glasgow College and UESTC in engineering and the law, and I'll say a little bit more about this context later on. The problem that we all face when we have to engage, in this case, over 500 students. And I think with the challenge of the pandemic, to do it online, we'll address some of those issues and how we've come up with some solutions, and we'll discuss the results later on. And then the research around digital badges and why digital badges were seen as a suitable solution for this particular problem. So I'll present that solution in particular in the context of Moodle. I know that other platforms, other digital learning platforms allow the implementation of digital badges, but our talk today will be specifically of the use of Moodle and digital badges. I'll share with you some of the student feedback that we've had, and then we'll look into the future. We'll present some of the challenges related to using such kind of modern technologies in teaching and learning and in the context of engineering. Now, before we actually get into the study, I think it's appropriate to understand the context of what actually is engineering the law as a course of study at Glasgow College UESTC. Well, it's a course that addresses a number of the IET UK spec accrediting outcomes, in particular to do with ethics, to do with branding and marketing and product development, and also concepts of law. Even though some of these are not specifically stated in the HAEP learning outcomes, but we've considered them to be an integral part of how we want our students to graduate in terms of knowledge and skills in all these 4 areas. Now, the course was designed to have these 4 learning outcomes and to address these 4 components. And in the process of developing these learning outcomes, we were quite careful to address the appropriate taxonomy of assessment domains for each one of these learning outcomes. You'll see the words describe or appraise or understand, and we connected specifically with the sorts of skills that we want the students to develop. And if we kind of go one level lower to the learning outcomes and we decompose those into, okay, so what it is that I'm going to teach, or what, in this case, it was a team of 3 colleagues are going to teach in this particular course. In terms of ethics, we actually took inspiration from the Royal Academy of Engineering. There's a lot of really good resources about it. And in that way, we know we are compliant with AHEP. In terms of product development and entrepreneurship, in terms of business law and branding and marketing, it's appropriate to say that none of the colleagues that are delivering these materials are subject specialists, but I would call them people that have an interest or a keen interest in these areas. In particular, business law was delivered by myself, and I'm a qualified lawyer. But in the case of product development and entrepreneurship and branding and marketing, it's, as I said, colleagues who have developed an interest, but are not subject specialists. Why is it important to understand this context? Because we sometimes our colleagues who teach engineering are kind of led into paths that they may not have research interests in. And so that may affect the students' motivation and perception of how engineering is taught. They might be thinking, oh, why is it that I haven't got somebody from the business school to teach branding and marketing? Or why haven't I got somebody from the business school to teach product development and entrepreneurship? Well, this will affect certainly how students feel in terms of the motivation, and it can pick up certainly whether the member of staff is an expert or somebody who has an interest in. Again, part of the context, just to let you know a little bit more about the setup, all the students that have taken this particular course are Glasgow College UESTC students. They're based at UESTC in Chengdu, China. They are year 3 students from a 4-year Scottish BEng degree in electrical and electronic engineering with 2 separate branches, communications engineering and information engineering. For the purpose of today's presentation and for the purpose of this study, we will not be segregating the results of the study into these 2 particular areas, and I will tell you a little bit more about the limitations later on when we look at the results. These students are on a dual award between UESTC and Glasgow, so they will graduate with two degrees, and their courses have been accredited, and we've obtained a 5-year accreditation. The particular course is 20 credits of study and around about 32 hours of tutor contact. It's a slightly different way in which we actually calculate the hours of study in China, because what the students have is they've got 2 blocks of 45 minutes per week of student contact. The course was delivered online, real time, via Zoom since the start of the pandemic. Student support has been done via email as well as Moodle discussion groups. However, the Moodle discussion groups haven't really been that active. Students haven't really taken to this. They do receive the information, but then they tend to communicate back using email rather than using the discussion group so that everybody knows the sorts of questions they're asking. So this is the context of the course so far. The course is assessed by 25% coursework and 75% end examination, and the learning outcomes have been delivered by a mix of subject specialists and generalist engineers. Total population taught in this particular cohort for the particular experiment that we're going to study today, it's been 404 students, and we've 3 members of staff who have been assisted by 14 teaching assistants. just to say a little bit more about the teaching assistants before we move on and to give you a full perspective of the context. These are fourth-year students who have gone through the course and will assist basically with things like engaging the students, monitoring their learning, and bringing to the attention of the members of staff what's happening in their group of students. These 14 teaching assistants had around about 36 students to look after for the duration of the term. Now, what the problem is here is that when we're teaching 500 students, it's extremely difficult to find out how they're progressing with a course. Not only it is difficult if you're teaching them physically, although physically you tend to have a perspective of who is in the classroom and who's not. So those numbers, that visual perspective gives you an idea of whether students are engaging or not. The classroom is full, yes, they're engaging. It's not full, maybe they're not. We can assume that. But in the current situation where we're delivering things via Zoom, and it was extremely challenging even to get a full perspective of the teaching room with 500 students. It was everybody in one room. The amphitheater is divided into 3 sections horizontally and extremely difficult to see through the camera all the angles. Now, of course, we all have the responsibility, let's put it this way, to motivate our learners and to engage them and to ensure that we nurture in them positive behaviors that they can then transfer to other areas of learning. But these behaviors are very much linked with their success. Now, the other thing is learning pathways and perspective of achievement of the learning outcomes. We never get to know exactly which learning outcomes our students are perhaps stronger or weaker at. And I think it's really important to try and obtain some of this information. And what we've done, we've managed to tease out some of this information that will help us plan for the future. Learning in a focused and bite-sized manner. So that's the other thing that we've got, how do we promote that this learning that the students are doing, or the learning that takes place, is done throughout the academic term and not just prior to deadlines, and perhaps ensuring that students are learning it a week, not just prior to the coursework deadlines, or not just because they're going to have an exam next week. And then to create an environment where we reward small bits of their learning. Feedback is not easy when you've got 500 students. You can't reach out to 500 students and 3 academic members of staff. And the teaching assistants don't have the same impact when it comes to being perceived as being in charge and motivating. They have some impact, but not the same impact as the senior academics delivering the course. Now, because I thought, well, what can we do? How can I actually find out if my students are engaging with their course? And I thought, well, digital badges have been about for a long time, and they've been used in formal ways. And these formal ways tend to be associated with qualifications that are delivered as continuous professional development. So, for example, Microsoft and other big companies have gone down that avenue. Of course, digital companies have an interest in promoting these sorts of things. But they've also been used in higher education, in particular in research, to try and see how they can be used. They're good at a number of things. I've tried to list some of the key points about using digital badges, because they provide a clear view of the students' learning in addition to their traditional grades. And we'll come back to this point later on in terms of the implementation. They provide students, providing students that have mastered a certain topic and are now ready for a more advanced topic. So we can find out where they're up to in their learning, and then they can move on from there. They're also representative of their achievement. So they've studied something, they obtained a badge, they know they've secured that knowledge and they've achieved it, and they can prove that they've achieved it. Now, the other ways in which digital badges have been used is to perhaps exempt students from doing certain things. So, for example, if you've got a badge that tests the student ability to write reports, then that could exempt the student from writing a particular piece of work that is relevant to just developing those skills. So we could use badges in that way to prove that they have a skill, that they've mastered a certain level of that skill, and then to exempt them from other skills. Now, badges can also unlock privileges through a prerequisite. So they can be used by HR departments, for example. You'll have to, I'm so sorry.
Oh, looks like maybe there's some pressing matters in real life. I guess we'll wait a moment for him to return.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be back in a minute.
My apologies, but working from home, that's what you get, you know, the pets are with us, family, and
No
so
worries.
just to come back to what I was saying. So in terms of the research and the uses of digital badges, and I'll recap this slide, we can use digital badges to exempt students from taking skills that they've already mastered. Okay, so that's a proof that they've achieved a particular skill, in particular in English language learning, where students study different parts of the language, you know, listening, comprehension and grammar. We could perhaps create skills in those areas and then say, well, a student has mastered level C2 or C1 in English language in this particular skill. We can use badges to unlock privileges through a prerequisite. And that is to say, if I've completed something that is a prerequisite for something else, then I may get a pay rise. That could be, or I can get a prize. That could be one example. And they can give students the credibility with employers. And that is certainly the reason that companies like Microsoft and many others are using badges in this particular way, in particular to study CPD courses or courses of a technical nature. I can think of networking as an example. Next slide. They're also a good way for to become a portable learner record. Okay, so a collection of badges will be associated with learning in a particular institution, but I can share them with another institution. And I will give you some examples later on about this. They can provide a way in which we can stack learning pathways. Again, I will give a very clear example of what's been done in terms of stacking different badges so that they can create a learning pathway for themselves. And they can be skills aligned. So we can associate and then transport those pathways from one particular technology to another. Just some statistics over the use of digital badges. The world's growing digital credential network, over 25,000 organizations in 160 countries use these types of digital credentials. So in terms of the solution, what's been created around the context that I've given earlier on, was to create content dependencies. So what we've got is we've got the different areas of study that I've highlighted earlier on. And in the material that was presented to all the students, we've created content dependencies to ensure that the students were taking the journey as the journey was originally planned by the academic members of staff on a weekly basis, and that the content dependencies were a prerequisite for something that would lead to a digital badge. So what you've got here in this particular example is a formative assessment that has a content dependency on completing a number of activities. And I will go through this in more detail. Now, the other thing was that we locked the content, associated it with success through the formative assessments. So formative assessments are present at the end of every topic. Those are locked on the basis of the content that is prerequisite for the completion of the formative assessment. And once the formative assessment is complete and passed, that will unlock the next content, but that will allow the students to claim their success and to know that they've done well in that particular topic. This way, we are monitoring the continuum of the students' learning throughout their learning journey of the 16 weeks of the course and on a topic-by-topic basis. Now, we've done this through the creation of activity checklists, and this is more for the student, so that the student knows. It's almost like a task list that says, these are the things that you've got to do before these things that you've got to do to complete all the requirements of learning in this particular topic. So in this case, this is the week 1 checklist. There were some videos to be looked at, there was some lecture material, there was some supplementary lecturing materials, and then there were some exercises, and then finally a formative assessment. So this weekly checklist allows the student to know and be in control of what needs to be completed in order to succeed on the course. And it acts as a reminder for the students as well. Now, not only we've created this sequence, this logical sequence, which has content triggers and then has success points, we've also timed it, because going back to the concept of ensuring that the students are not leaving their work to the day before a coursework deadline, we wanted to make sure that they're engaging with the course throughout and through the material that is presented, which we designed so that we know it's calibrated for the duration of the contact hours with us, but it also has and promotes independent study opportunities throughout the different activities that they get. So timing was used as a key criteria to award a badge. That is, an event-driven criteria for the badge allows me to understand if the student is completing the activities within a certain amount of time. And what we did was to give a student about a week after the lecture material had been delivered to complete all the study activities and then to attempt the formative assessment before they can move on to the next lesson. Now, students will only be able to unlock the content for the next lesson if they have completed the previous one and if they have completed the formative assessment. But to be able to be awarded a badge, they must complete the formative assessment by the deadline that has been given to them. So in this particular example, you've got here the week 1 checklist states that the formative assessment must be completed by the 1st of October. So around a week since the lesson was delivered. In some cases, we had to play with bank holidays and the timetable, and students actually had probably around about 10 days to actually complete a lesson that they had outstanding and complete formative assessment. But reward was only given if the timing was preserved in their study. This gave us an opportunity to find out where the students are spending the most time on their course. Where are they going, what they're studying and when, because through Moodle statistics as well, what links they're clicking on and what interests them the most, and how long they're staying on each lesson and where they lose the interest and leave. So all of this was combined behind the scenes through the setting of the deadlines, let's put it this way, for the digital. Rigorously, we had team meetings where we discussed what is happening throughout those weeks and how students are taking the feedback. We also used the feedback provided by the teaching assistants, which were very, very valuable in terms of how they felt the class was going, given that we were delivering things online. So the rewards took a digital pathway, let's put it this way, so a digital badge. The reward was effectively a digital badge. And we created a learning pathway for our students where every week they had learning objectives, and for every week they would obtain a badge. Then at the end of a learning outcome, they would be given a digital badge for that particular set, for that particular learning outcome, as I've mentioned at the start, okay, and linked with it. And then at the end of the course, they would get a champion badge to highlight that they completed all the activities. Now, the interesting thing about this is that you will only be able to secure your learning pathway digital badge if you have completed all of the mandatory activities and on time. So you won't be able to get your learning outcome badge if you've done it, but you haven't done it on time. Okay, so going back to the sections where I was talking about behaviors and ensuring that the students are learning on a continuous basis, that's what we want to achieve as well. And of course, at the end of the course, that's all the students who have secured all their digital badges on time for every week of study, and also have secured their intended learning outcomes for the section, the badge related to it, I mean. So all the badges were linked to learning objectives for the lesson, and the learning objectives were being tested through the formative assessment. The formative assessment was a quiz, okay, which gives them direct feedback of what they've done well, but also highlights to them the things that they haven't done well and points out to them the sorts of things they should be revising. So we picked a number of questions. We tended to have about 10 questions and link those questions to the learning objectives, and then giving students very direct feedback to the sorts of things that they should be reviewing if they had a question that was wrong on their formative assessment. The pass mark on the formative assessments was set to 100, and the students could attempt it multiple times. Now, once they've obtained all the badges for a particular set of lessons associated with the learning outcome, and they've done it on time, they will automatically be granted the pathway badge, which is in this case for the ethics learning outcome that they have done. So then at this stage we can say, okay, because ethics is not only a HAYHEP area of priority in terms of engineering education, but it's also a skill, and therefore we can associate this particular badge with the skill and competency of identifying ethical issues in engineering, being able to resolve them, and being able to apply them as engineers in the future. So to obtain this badge, they would have to complete all lecture 1, 2, 3, and 4 formative assessments on time. And now, as I've discussed earlier, one of the fundamental key measures of these badges is to be able to not just use them for the purpose of education, but also to try and, I'd say, promote students as individuals and their knowledge. And it is to connect the badges to external backpacks for portability. And I will talk a little bit more about this in the next slide as well. But what we have is, once the students have gained all the badges through the Moodle of the University of Glasgow, they can export those badges to an independent platform. Okay, those badges will be verified because they were issued by Glasgow. They can be verified as a way to say, I've achieved a certain level of knowledge. We're not relating to anything that's to do with their degree classification or their marks on a particular course. They're just a reflection of the students' knowledge and skill, as if you were doing a CPD course. Now, students can do that by connecting and creating an account on one of a number of independent external backpacks that exist. One of them is Badger. Badger allows you to connect to Moodle. I believe for colleagues who are attending today that there is another platform other than Moodle that has this direct connection. I think it's called Canvas. I don't use it. In the past, I've kind of logged in once, but all the institutions I have worked have been using Moodle. But if you do use Canvas, I know this facility is also available, and you can connect to the Badger backpack from your Canvas virtual learning environment. So this might be useful for those of you who use Canvas. Now, students will connect to the external backpack. They'll share their badges from the course. Okay, of course, this must be enabled from the institutional Moodle settings. And they can also choose to display any public badge collections that they have on their own backpacks. So they will have been, well, in this case, they were awarded badges for the individual weeks of study, but they were also awarded badges for the learning outcomes. And how this translates into badger here is that the backpack badge contains all the distinct badges, and then the pathway is an aggregation of badges. So in our case, on a week-by-week basis, they would collect the badges, and then the learning outcome badge constitutes the pathway. Pathway ethics, pathway business law, and so on and so forth, as applied to the course. Now, coming on to the results part of this study. And what we've got here, I've tried to put as much detail as possible so we can see from a percentage point of view, and in the next graph I'll show you numbers, but we had on average 73% of student engagement. So what is student engagement in this particular case? That means that the checklist activities were completed and the formative assessment was completed and successfully passed by the deadline that was given, which was roughly around a week to 10 days after the material was being delivered. I wish to point out as well that the material was posted on Moodle and always released a week in advance at least. In some cases, when colleagues were ready, even though the students were already studying, were still studying a topic of week 1 or 2, the topics of the following weeks were already there, but they were locked. Of course, they would only be unlocked when the student passes their formative test. So 73% on average student engagement with a minimum of 55. So we never had less than 55% of the cohort engaging on time with their studies. And I had a little bit of looked into the details of why 55. What was happening in the students' learning schedule in week 4? Well, there was finally a project preliminary report hand in date, and I think that justifies for the drop from 72% to 55% in week 4. And students had their midterm exams in week 10, and that justifies the 58%. Maximum engagement, 83% of the students, which is really, really good. And we can, from this graph, we can look at the different learning outcomes, and we can start looking at what are the areas that the students enjoyed most and were engaged with, and what they perhaps enjoyed less. So the learning outcomes, learning outcome number 1 is ethics. That's second one, entrepreneurship. Then we've got business law, and then we've got the marketing one here. In terms of the numbers, the same graph, but a different perspective. This is accumulated to 417 students at peak and 277 students at the lowest point of a population of 504 students engaged with the course, okay? These values have significantly improved from the previous run of the course, even though I'm still trying to obtain statistics from the past runs of the course. But we have, and this has to be done through attendance records, and this is what I'm doing at this stage. But we had round about 60 to 100 students usually attending the class. 125, I believe, was the maximum for a 16-week period. So very, very low attendance indeed. But that work is being done separate to this. But it's a good addition to at least understand what we've done and the success that it's had. Now, in terms of the badges awarded for the different skills or the pathways, the ethics pathway was achieved by 246 students, the entrepreneurship pathway achieved by 303 students, business law 261, and then marketing and branding 319. At the very end, what we've done was that every single student who had achieved all the learning pathways on time, they qualified for a champion's badge. So 151 students obtained every single badge on time, which means that they've completed all of the learning activities from the beginning to the end of the course, so that's 16 weeks of study, at the required time before they went into the exam. So this is, one could look at it and see, well, that's actually a depressing statistic, given that you've got 504 students. But this is, you have to achieve one thing and the other and the other. The moment that you have missed one badge, you will not be qualifying for the Champions badge. So you will have missed that opportunity. And in fact, what we've done, we've associated this with a small prize to give to 151 students, which cost us, I think, about 10 RAE. But very positive statistics of how students are engaging, and certainly very interesting for us to now go into each one of these sections and understand what they've enjoyed, how we can present the materials better, and how we can improve on what's been done so far. So this graph on the left, you've got the student numbers, and on the right, you've got the percentages. So 30% of students engaging on time, which is a really good measure, I would say. In terms of the pass rate on the course, it sits at 95%. So to give you a perspective of how this has translated into formal assessment for the course. Now, the student feedback, and this is just student feedback relevant to digital badges. There was an awful lot of student feedback, some of it in Chinese, which I had to translate, but I think the ones that are relevant to the purpose of this study, we were told that the module was enjoyable and easy to follow. I can share my badges on the social networks. I learned how to be up to date with my studies. I enjoyed the collection of badges, and I have them all. And there is a lot to take in this course, but the learner task that should be list allowed me to know exactly what I had to do every week. So some very, very positive feedback from our students around this concept of using digital badges to monitor their learning. Now, what other challenges do I see for the future? I think what we would like to do with my colleagues as a team is to try and look at the lesson plans and customize the lesson plans with the badges, not just make the badges dependent on the formative assessment, but actually then align this with perhaps the objectives of the lesson in a way that we haven't done before. We want to do this, and I have to say that we want to do this based on Moodle, not us doing it manually, thinking about what questions should be in the formative assessments and then mapping them, as I said, manually, independently to the lesson objectives. We want to create the customized lesson plans, which are Moodle supported, and then have all of this statistical information given to us without us having to go through and determining what questions from the formative assessments were perhaps less well answered, and what does that mean in terms of how the material was presented. So this is a very detailed and a very complex task that we're planning on doing for the future. And the other one is to link what we're doing with engineering competencies. We know that we've got a HEP, we've got a number of competencies in the matrix, and we are planning on linking this so that when we have an accreditation, we can actually go into the detail of where our students are doing really, really well and areas where we can improve. But I think the biggest challenge we have, if the students are just collecting this for fun, then so be it. If they're finding it, if it's just a game, and a lot of authors out there who write about digital badges talk about gamification. Yes, it could be. But other companies do give a currency to this. Microsoft, for example, and I've mentioned this example on a number of occasions today, it has real currency. Is it accepted? And would a badge issued by the University of Glasgow on a course, would it have acceptance? Okay, we can prove it's reliable, we can prove it's trustworthy by linking it back to us as the issuer, and then having the students port that badge across to different platforms. But I don't think we're at the level of acceptance yet, and perhaps this should be a discussion and a project that could not just evolve within a course of study, but actually perhaps into a program level style badges or even awards. Question mark, would it be that the future will mean that we will not issue student certificates at the end of their degree and it's a digital badge? I don't know. It all depends on how things will evolve, but certainly students see that the social networks, and this is certainly one of the main areas of where we can explore this, broadcasting their credentials, promoting themselves is certainly one way to move forward. So thank you very much for listening. And once again, very sorry about the dog in the room. Any questions for anyone in the audience?
There's a wave hand button. Melanie.
I know what a button is, so I have a head start. I am a bit worried about tying badges to the timing of completion. I can see why you're doing this, but I'm worried for two reasons. And one is that it may create equality and diversity issues for students who, for instance, have non-traditional roles, who are carers, for instance, or who have to work part-time to finance their studies, who therefore cannot follow the same study schedule that other people do, but who still end up arriving at those learning outcomes just maybe in their own time and a bit later. So I wonder about that. And then the other thing is, if the badges are meant to be a thing that can be shown, for instance, to future employers, that the student has mastered a specific skill, then in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter if they have mastered it on the 20th of October or on the 15th of October. And so I wonder whether a better way of doing it would be to have badges that really relate just to the content of the learning objectives being fulfilled, and then maybe extra badges for things being done in a timely manner. And then maybe you can only be king of the course or whatever it is if you have done everything on time, but still that those atomic badges for having mastered a certain skill are independent of the timing of that. Have you thought about different models of doing that?
Melanie, we haven't. This particular course is run on a full-time mode of study only. That's the first thing to say. There's no part-time students. And so the current study and how we've developed it has to adapt to the context. And that context means that what we have in terms of equality and diversity and inclusion, I know what students of mine have got personal learning plans. I know that in this case, in this particular cohort, there wasn't a single student who had a learning plan. That information gets sent to all members of staff at the beginning of the academic year. So we know if we have in our classroom somebody who needs extra support. Of course, if you do have students like that, then some dispensation, or you can always create different types of badges or the same badge with different deadlines that just apply to a particular group of students. So the students would know that they're in a special group. We can create a group, and that group is visible to us, and they can be awarded the same badge, but just not with timing. But timing is critical. Timing is critical because with 500 students, if we don't use timing as a way to monitor their learning, then you lose the purpose of that monitoring. It's what I'm trying to avoid is I have no idea what my students are doing, and then the day before the deadline or 2 days before the deadline, there's so many questions. I can't possibly manage 500 students in one piece. So we're not encouraging students to just do the work when they want to do the work. We're encouraging them to also meet deadlines, okay? But this deadline doesn't affect adversely their studies, their coursework, their exam. This is like, it's almost the second part of the talk when I mentioned gamification or towards the end. I don't really want it to be a game and to start using these words, because then I feel I'm kind of devaluing what I'm trying to do. And I would rather go up the scale and say, if eventually we can get something like this recognized and it's a skill, then the timing on the badge could potentially be removed because you've obtained the skill. But I have to look after the interests of the members of staff teaching and making sure that everybody is learning at a set pace rather than leaving learners behind. I know exactly the students that were having challenges in terms of the timing, and those students were being monitored every week by their respective teaching assistants. So the teaching assistant had non-editorial access to Moodle, and their learners were constantly being sent emails to remind them, you know, you've got work to do. Have you completed it? Do you want to discuss it? And those names were being sent to me every Friday, and we were discussing what to do and what not to do. So I think that should really erase concerns of equality, diversity, and inclusion. And as I said, if there was personal learning plans, we could associate those with the same badge, but different timing. In fact, we can use the timing that is recommended in the personal learning plan as a way to set that timing for those learners, because you have them for exams, so an extra 20 minutes, or for coursework, an extra week. If that was the case, we could do that perfectly well.
Okay, thank you.
David, do you have one?
Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. It's actually a very good way to ensure that students engage and are looking at the formative aspect of it. Now, one key question, is this something that you had planned and you had designed from the ground up, or you basically implemented it because of the pandemic and online delivery?
I think it's the pandemic has sped up this process. I have used digital badges, but not in the detail that I've used them in this particular way. The concerns were, we are not in Chengdu, we are delivering over Zoom, we can't even see the full room properly. How do I try and monitor their learning? And I think it's really been just, things have gone quicker, they've moved quicker. And the year before, we noticed attendance was very, very poor. We really felt that something was needed. We actually looked at the learning outcomes, and we looked at delivering the material in a different way. But I think from what I gathered from the teaching assistants, some students were actually quite happy. And I have to say there's a cultural perspective to this. It's interesting to see if this was used with UK-based students, whether that cultural perspective was there. Asian students like to collect these things, stickers and so on. When students were, they're 18, 19, 20, 21, and they're collecting stickers from football players and so on. Things that I haven't done since I was about 11. So it was quite interesting to see this. I think colleagues, Melanie, I think you were trying to say something, but you are on mute, maybe?
I was just saying there's nothing wrong with collecting football stickers as an adult.
Yes, yeah. So I thought that might work well, you know, in terms of the Chinese culture, but would it work with us?
I mean, I had been wondering
what... It'd be interesting to see if Glasgow would try and run the same.
Maybe also not just in terms of culture, but in terms of personality. Who are the kinds of
design
students,
of the badges?
Who are the kinds of students who are most motivated by a thing like that?
Yeah,
that would be interesting to see. Yeah.
The other thing was that actually the badges were not designed by myself. I let the teaching assistants design the badges. So they were all, if there is a cultural perspective to take into consideration, they had no input from a European, you know? If they, at one point I thought, maybe these badges are a little bit childish, I thought, but I thought, hey, you've done it, let's run with them and let's see. When you take a look at professional badges from the companies that are issuing them, Cisco is another example, they tend to be a little bit more sophisticated. Ours, yeah, you could almost say I'm collecting stickers from a much more younger collection of things that, you know, people would have done in their, like I said, 10, 11 years of age. But I don't know if the design influences decision in this case, difficult to tell. Again, I don't want to divert myself from the purpose of my exercise. My exercise is to try and understand how my students are learning on a weekly basis, and I can tailor the way in which I'm delivering my content to the way in which the students are engaging. That is the most important part of the equation for me. That's the most important part of the study. If they're just doing it for fun, that's fine. But actually, at the end of the day, they are doing it at the same time that the material is being developed. It even is easier for them to raise appropriate questions at the right time, wait until 4 or 5 weeks later, and then come back with questions from weeks 1 or 2. And that is, to me, the most important. And again, it doesn't count for their assessment, so they don't have to be worried, if I don't do this stuff on time, what will happen to me? Nothing will happen to you. You can still go through the content, you can still ask questions at any time, but you're not. If other colleagues of yours are talking about badges and they've collected this one and that one, then you haven't got it because you haven't bothered to do it on time. So that's something I'm paying attention to, really.
All right, I think David was first, and I'll get to you, Dagwo.
Just one last question from me. You have mentioned the use of teaching assistants who are also students. What was the motivation for these students? Were they being paid, and or how did you go about selecting these students? Because at the end of the day, you need to ensure that there are competent and probably supportive students in their own right.
So, David, we have a quite rigorous process to recruit teaching assistants. First of all, they must be Year 4 students, that's final year students. They must have done the course of study that they want TA in. There's an advert that goes out around August time, beginning of September, for a recruitment process. They are interviewed. We take into consideration their particular GPA overall, but also their mark on the course that they want to do TA work in. We then recruit a suitable number of TAs. At the moment, we're trying to keep a TA ratio around about 20 to 25. And there is a job description for them, and they are paid. They also assist in marking exam papers, but only for years 1 and 2, not for years 3 and 4.
Dagwo.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, thank you, Dr. Ponciano, for such a very interesting, very interesting, informative introduction or sharing of your experiences of using digital badges. By the way, can I just clarify the message I put in the chat? That's just, referring to stickers for children. I wasn't commenting on the suitability of whether this is suitable for this level of, adults. I was just simply making an analogy. Sorry for that created problems. Right. My question really follows on from David's. The use of teaching assistants, because these are students, just wondering how they were perceived by the students. Any comments from the students, on the use of these higher, obviously older students as teaching assistants?
We have used teaching assistants since the start of the partnership, and over a period of time, we have made sure that the job description is, let's say, fit for purpose. They're there as mentors, okay? But mentors from a contextual perspective, they support the students in ensuring that they achieve their goals, but also they help us make sure that the students are with us, they are engaging with us. So before the pandemic, when we were flying to China, it's the responsibility of these TAs to ensure that they preserve active communication with their groups, to encourage them to attend. Of course, that doesn't always go the way we describe the JD. And I think certainly from the previous delivery, I knew that the TAs that we had perhaps were less efficient. at encouraging to attend, because the attendance was extremely poor. Having said that, timetabling always plays a key role in attendance. We have very early lessons. I could be teaching at 7 o'clock in Chengdu. That's 7 a.m. So that's not very conducive of good attendance. But they add value. They mentor the students. They should be proactive enough to engage with their student groups, not just. And I want to say something. Although we are using Moodle, I know for a fact that the TAs have got their WeChat groups for their students. We haven't wanted, although we don't support WeChat, but we haven't said to the TAs, you can't do this. So as long as the students give consent to be in a WeChat group with their TAs, we're fine with that because they communicate that way. So this is a cultural perspective we haven't really wanted to challenge, because it's been working and it's convenient. And in fact, members of staff at Glasgow do have WeChat accounts to communicate with students. So that's in one way in which they support the students and make sure that they are, delivering value for money as well.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yes, WeChat definitely, I think, is used widely in China, both between the students or among the students themselves, and also between the staff and the students, as actually a quite effective way of communication, as we know, whether on a different on a program or within a joint institute. And that's from my experience as well. Just adding that perspective. And can I just ask another related question? Before you decided to use this, digital badges with the students as a way of monitoring or encouraging engagement, have you done training with these students and the teaching assistants, or at least information sessions, things like that?
Yes, all the teaching assistants were trained at the beginning of this particular run of the course on how to use Moodle to find the statistics and the sorts of things we were expecting them to do, such as communicating with the students that were engaging less, finding out if the activity checklist had been completed, what hadn't been completed, emailing those students, and reporting to myself and the other two colleagues that were teaching on the course every Friday. So we did brief them on what they had to do to make sure that they were supportive of this particular way of teaching, rather than just their traditional job description. So we had really good feedback every week. I was getting emails with the students that were not engaging. I also sent emails back to say, please, make sure that you complete your work. Any questions, email me, or please put notes on the discussion forum. The discussion forums were not successful at all. I don't think, even in the past, I have tried to use these with students in Asia. I didn't see much take on those. But email one-to-one communication, yes. In some cases, they said to me, I'm very sorry, sir, but I have had this or that to do. I've not been able to complete the work, but I will make sure it's completed. So I had this kind of positive relationship with those that were being sent emails to say, can you make sure that you're up to date with your course?
Thanks very much.
Then Melanie, they had a question, and then Hongli.
So I want to go back to that question of badges and stickers, because it occurs to me that I think where badges are more than just gold stars that you get for completing a task, is where they become a record of what the student can do and what skills they have acquired. And that's you said that as well, but I think that's really quite powerful. And you said at the end, maybe half jokingly, that you don't know if we will just send students off with a badge at the end rather than a diploma. But honestly, I think if we could replace marks by portfolios of what students can do and what their skills are, I would be all for that. So if a well-designed badge system sort of goes some way towards that, I actually think that could be the future of education, I hope. I don't know, that is not really a question, but more a comment. But I mean, I'm sure, Joao, that has been on your mind.
I want to, Melanie,
Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. No, I say I agree with you. My concern with doing it is how can I want to go a little deeper in this. I want to link my badges, not just with my learning outcomes, with skills. And I'm not doing that at the moment because, like I said, one of my main concerns was monitoring students' engagement. But now I know it's working okay. Maybe I can do something that relates to skills, and how can I prove that at the end of 4 weeks in engineering ethics, my student is able, for example, to, I don't know, conduct an assessment of ethics for a particular project. And that's the sort of things that it's extremely, extremely relevant, because that's what an employer will want to know. They're fine with the students knowing the theoretical perspectives, but can they do an ethics assessment, for example? Or, for example, if an engineer is part of a team who's negotiating the contract with a company, can that engineer spot anything on the contract that's going to be untoward the company? That's the sorts of things that's really, really important. I have to say something. This is not one of the subjects that the students are most passionate about in China, because they see it as, I suppose, even in the UK, sometimes students are a little bit adverse to ethics and why are we studying law? Why are we studying marketing? We signed up for engineering. I should be doing calculations all day, every day. So we have that narrative that we have to be careful. But if I can try and say this individual has been awarded this badge, and it can guarantee you it can identify ethical issues on a particular engineering project, I think that's a skill that will have currency, but I'm not doing that at the moment. I'm not too far, but it needs more work. And the other thing I want to say is, there was another concern at the start of this project, and maybe I didn't highlight it, was how am I going to monitor 500 students, right? Or maybe I did say it. And how will I do it in a way that is reliable, that is efficient, timely for me? Because otherwise, by the time I've looked at all the student profiles, we're already on week 10, and it's every week that I've got this volume. So handling this volume of information. So these are all the challenges I have to address. But definitely I want to integrate lesson plans and connecting the formative assessments with skills. But this is very laborious. But there is one positive aspect to this. Once it's done and the course stays as it is, you can very quickly ensure the success of the course and understand exactly where students are having difficulties. So,
thank you.
Holly?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Hi, John. A long time no see, and I just want to follow up the question David and Dalgor mentioned. A very interesting session, and I particularly like your mention about using the final year student and year 4 student as the teaching assistant. I just want to check. I'm assuming that you're using the current joint you call the joint institute or joint college final year student. Am I right, Joao? Okay, so if it's your final year, year 4 joint college students, and you mentioned that they are using WeChat for communication. So do you have any University of Glasgow staff member to monitor their communication via WeChat, or you let them to do this freely?
We don't, and we do not support from a From a governance perspective, the university does not support WeChat. I'm not going to go into the legal and political agenda of this. Now, I think what's the analogy? We are running into the storm and we have to sail through it, because that's our students, that's who they are, and it's very well accepted that WeChat is a form of communication, and it can be a form of informal communication. So we can't say to them no. And members of staff who wish to have WeChat accounts, and I have my own, and under the circumstances, I've had no choice than to communicate more efficiently with my students via WeChat. And I've done so because WeChat doesn't reveal my phone number. It's just a name handle. So I thought there's no risk here for me. So from a University of Glasgow perspective, no, this is not supported. From a governance perspective, from a practice and social perspective, I think a lot of my colleagues are using WeChat, and we do not monitor the communications, no. But whatever is done with ourselves, I'm sure we are integral enough to manage those. And I do expect that my teaching assistants are also integral, that they would stop behaviors that shouldn't be encouraged, or that they would bring that to our attention. Very difficult to monitor, but nevertheless, I think it would be, I wouldn't say impossible, but very challenging, because they don't really take to, like I said, the discussion forums. No, it's not been a positive experience. I think they read them, but they don't participate. So the engagement would be missing for us, and that's what we want out of it. So.
Yes, agree. Yes, I completely agree. And WeChat is probably the most efficient way in China for communication. But again, it may not be encouraged here. Yes, and in relation to your recruitment of this level 4, not level 4, year 4, and joint college student, and are they some kind of like what we do here, like a job for students? Am I right? In this type of a job role, is that
yes,
job for
yes,
students?
they are advertised on
the okay, and
yeah,
it is
yeah.
And
the university advertises it for us.
And is that paid by University of Glasgow, or is paid by your partner in China, your partner institution in China?
The partner in China.
Okay,
yeah, I think that's we call it reverse billing. I think it gets billed back to us from a financial perspective, but it's definitely paid in China.
Yeah. And do you roughly know how many hours you actually use those teaching assistant? I meant per student, per teaching assistant.
So what we do is, what I do as Vice Dean, I will accept requests from course coordinators who will tell me, based on the student numbers and based on the way in which they want to deliver their course, how many students they wish to have. And then we assume that the engagement, the contractual engagement of the student is associated with the teaching hours. So if a member of staff comes back to me and says, oh, can I have 4 teaching assistants, I will assume that the teaching assistants are for every week for the period of 16 weeks. And we've got 45-minute sessions. We actually pay them a little bit more. We pay them for an extra 45 minutes because students have got to travel about 20 minutes from where the resources are to the teaching room. So for example, picking up not the speaker system, the microphones and the digital pens and other bits of equipment that they had to pick up for the lesson, they have to walk about 20 minutes. So we pay them an extra period of time. So if they do 2 blocks of 45, we pay them for 3 blocks of 45.
Okay, thank you very much, Joao.
I have a question.
My pleasure.
Have you considered using Dean Talk? I believe some universities are using that right now in China, and it's akin to WeChat, but you can have I believe you can have kind of like discussions within the discussion. So more like Moodle type, like, for example, like if there's a question, then the students can reply to that particular question and they can see the replies from that. And so it doesn't move the conversation up as fast as WeChat does. Oh, I'll get to you after Dr. Campbell, sorry.
I haven't, Christine, I haven't. I haven't used it, no. And I don't think, I've heard that once from a colleague, and this is dating back from middle of last year when we were discussing all sorts of platforms on how we would then manage this contingency situation that we've been in. There was far too many discussions and too many proposals at the start. The majority of our discussions were not just about suitability of platforms, it was also about concerns over scalability, availability of the platform, and also to do with GDPR. We had, our technical teams were actually advising us every time that a member of staff said, oh, what about this? I know students in China use this or the other. They would go away and look at all those issues for us. But in particular, the scalability was very, very important from an operational point of view. And then, of course, the legal perspective was also important. And even today, those discussions come back when it comes to content sharing and, you know, content going across borders and so on. So
much more complicated than expected, I see. Dr. Campbell?
Yes, I didn't think, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No. So I just wanted to mention about Ding Talk. So Ding Talk was actually the saving grace for my module and for a lot of for my university. I'm with Doofy and SII, and we were able to use that in terms of, I know you were talking about the concern for scalability. Ding Talk is highly scalable. We had as a matter of fact, when the pandemic first hit and we didn't have our online portal up or anything, it was in the very beginning. We were all scattered around the world, and we were trying to have a meeting, and Zoom wasn't necessarily accessible by many of our team leaders. So the university actually set up a infrastructure in Ding Talk, which you're able to do. But then we started using Zoom a lot more. But as far as my classes, all of my classes were taught on Ding Talk because students were able to access it. And when I do my presentation towards the end of the conference, I'll be sharing with you how my students were highly engaged on Ding Talk. And I know a lot of teachers are probably like, you let your students use their cell phones? I did. They were highly engaged and everything. I mean, you know, students are always like this on their phones anyway, but they were able to communicate and they were answering questions that I asked them. It was a part of class participation. So Ding Talk could be an option that you might want to look into, or anyone might want to look into, considering that we're still, you know, mitigating the challenges right now of the pandemic and still having to teach online. But if Ding Talk doesn't even have to pay me to promote them, okay, I will promote them for free. I believe in Ding Talk, and I just think that it was a great tool for us, and it still is because we still use it now.
Thank you. It's very nice to hear experiences from others in relation to different technologies, and I think I have to say this particular type of, let's say, scheme that I'm using, this pedagogical approach, may not fit every single course. You know, I think we have to use different solutions to capture the audience, and sometimes using the same solution can also get very tiring. You know, our students are exposed to digital information in very different ways these days, and they're very accepting of different platforms, and they're very confident and comfortable navigating between, you know, different things. I think providing solutions that can, increase engagement and monitoring and positive experiences and changing students' behavior for the better, I'm all up for it. And many colleagues think that, it's a lot of investment from a time perspective. Yes, it was. This year, I'll be honest with you, putting this together took me about 4 weekends. So that's 8 working days. I couldn't find the time during the week. I had to do it that weekend. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. I'm not trying to say that we had to work that weekend, but I just felt a little bit more relaxed when I implemented it. But now I can materialize on what I can, there's return on investment. I can already see it. And next year I can roll this scheme. I can improve it. It'll probably take me a lot less time. And if others want to use it, because this is a Moodle template, that Moodle template can be exported and given to another colleague who wants to use and put these experiences and tailor these experiences to other modules of study. And maybe there are things that are not going to work as good, and maybe there are other things that are going to work very, very well. We structure the curriculum. The 3 colleagues who teach with myself, or 3 in total with me, we made a decision that this could only work if the curriculum was very well structured, and the 3 of us took exactly the same approach. Otherwise it wouldn't work, because if you've got different approaches inside one course, the students are just going to get confused. So it wasn't about my ego or somebody's ego on how I like to do it. It's about a standard approach, maybe wrong, maybe right, we will see. And we've seen it, it worked well. There are things we know and feedback that we have that we're going to improve. But there was nothing adverse on the badges in terms of engaging with students and communicating. And this is a portable solution as well. And I think that has to be said. We're all extremely busy and we've been working far, far too many hours, and any solutions that can help us do something and we know it works, I think they're very welcome, and I welcome them certainly.
Thank you. Did that answer your question, Dr. Campbell? Thumbs up. Are there any more questions for Dr. Joao Ponciano? Okay, looks like there's no other more questions. Thank you again then, Dr. Joao. This has been a very interesting topic. And I guess we will, Melanie, shall we?
I think we will just reconvene next week. And we have, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I'm sure it's going to be great. And we'll send out a reminder email as usual. And thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
See you all next week.
Thank you everybody. Melanie, thank you for all the hard work in planning this. Thank you so much.
It's mostly Christine who does the hard work, I have to say.
Have a lovely day.
See you, bye.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, bye-bye.